Thank you so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages that we are on these days. More than welcome to comment throughout the show here today, but we are out of the office this week, but still recorded new episodes for you while we are not present here. So free to leave your comments, engage in that conversation that we all know that everyone just loves to have, but we're not in the office, so won't be taking any calls for this week here, but still bringing these new shows. So kicking off this week, joined for the first time here in a minute by Chris Babcock with KTSM-TV. Thanks for coming back here with us, Chris.
Oh, I appreciate coming back. It's been a real busy time, but glad to be back talking elections and everything else.
Absolutely, yeah. We are in the kind of penultimate bit of the actual filing period for the 2022 election, so that's what we're going to focus on here for this show, because a lot of currents can be seen. There's still been some surprises, and may even be some surprises in between the bit of time when we record this and it airs, but there are a lot of currents that can already be seen, the races, the fights, the contests, and the way that they're going to go about getting a little bit clearer at this point anyway. We still got surprises, October, September, every month is probably going to have that surprise here. It's not just the, right before the November surprise anymore, because, well, Texas elections have always been a little bit different here, and that's primarily what we're going to be focusing on, because we have some very important seats on the ballot here. So just to set the table, we, of course, talking about the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race. We're also going to interject a bit about the attorney general's race, because that one has had some interesting situations developing on it, and frankly, for most of these races, we've been interviewing a lot of the candidates already so far. And then, of course, one of the major ones that has already been focused on here locally, that of the state, not the state representative, but the federal representative, the congressperson for our area, of which we already do have that contest shaping up as well. So that's some of what we're going to get into. And not that it's, we've been saying this for a minute, but if anyone is at all unfamiliar with the fact, we are firmly in campaign season here already.
Oh, it wasn't like it went away. It was as soon as the last cycle was over, the fundraising started, and again, that precedent, we knew it was going to be an increasing trend for most everybody running for the race. But as soon as President Trump was elected, he went ahead and filed for his next election. We knew that was going to be adopted by a majority of not just the Republicans, but of anybody running, because the earlier you start, the kind of it becomes a momentum thing, not as much as previous, but you get your name out there, you can start fundraising almost immediately. Like he started fundraising the day after his inaugural balls. So it was an interesting thing to go as far as seeing how it comes so early in the process, and it's almost a never-ending election cycle.
That's very true, which both is exciting and nightmarish in kind of equal measure, I'm not going to lie. I have a little bit more towards the former, but I have a bit of the latter in me as well. So that's what we're getting into, and to break some of these down here. So let's start off with one of the ones that is probably top of mind for most people, and that is definitely the governor's race, if only because of the local connection that we have there with former representative and former presidential and Senate candidate, a lot of formers in the title here, of Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke having announced his challenge as apparently not the only Democrat who has announced, but I say apparently not because I wasn't even fully aware until researching and making sure we had all our ducks in a row for this, that there are a couple others that I have never heard of, and most people probably wouldn't have unless they're probably in their campaigns, but definitely the most recognizable name on the Democrat side of the ballot, challenging, of course, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who has been in state office in some form or another for it's almost hard to track how long, because he was Attorney General before this and had other statewide offices, so been in state-level government as an elected official for a decade or more here, minimum, easy to say here. And also some notable names even challenging him on his own primary ballot. So there's a lot going on with just that race on its own.
Again, we've talked about it at length here, what is needed to be done. We knew the Democrats were going to kind of coalesce a little bit behind Beto, and they've actually done that. And there's been a lot of different coalescing behind Governor Abbott. Not really unexpected, the challenge from his right, but just it's going to be a little bit harder for him to bring those that are to his right into his fold. And I think really what they're doing is they're challenging him on, he did too much during the pandemic, really just putting in what little mask mandates and whatever he did. That was too much for some. How is he going to rectify that with those members of the Republican Party that are to his left? So he's done a lot in the past couple of election cycles and the legislative sessions to get what we call red meat to his base.
Oh, yeah.
But to that right side, it's a really hard way to get them back involved in the party, because if somebody says, hey, I don't like that you did this, and you say, well, I only did this, it's kind of hard to change hearts and minds. On the Democratic side, they're going to have to come up with some sort of interesting plan, because running on Build Back America Better, and again, it's top down, as we've said. When that actually happens, you've got to be able to turn it around and say, what does it do for me here in the state of Texas? And given the governor's shortcomings that happened during the winter, he's had a couple of missteps here and there. Can the Democrats here in Texas really go after that? And is Beto going to be able to connect with those? We know he connects, but is he going to be able to connect with those voters in those middle areas around Dallas, around Houston, around North Texas, Lubbock? Is he going to be able to get people to his right on this campaign? And I think that's the big question.
Rio Grande Valley also a very focused on area here, because that had been going into the last election anyway, considered a bulwark of sorts, and that either didn't materialize or got subverted in the last election from those expectations. I hold the contention personally that in-person, door-to-door electioneering rallies are still a very powerful tool even in this day and age, and even more particularly for areas that may not be the most connected, the more rural, the ones that don't have broadband access, et cetera, and that's why gains were seen in the last election. I mean, it still sticks with me that we had a local state representative announce their candidacy for the Speaker of the Texas House, and that just literally wasn't even possible based on the turnout of that election, due in no small part to the turnouts that we're seeing within the Rio Grande Valley. So that's definitely a factor that will be focused on by the O'Rourke campaign and probably Democrats in general. I've been spending a decent amount of time there. So I want to focus a little bit more on Abbott here, because he's still a pretty popular statewide figure here in Texas. Most of the other major candidates, most polling has shown him maybe waning a bit, but still dominating the field, with everyone else basically almost scraping for the attention here. And those other candidates we should mention here, most of whom we've already had, the major ones anyway, we've had on the show here previously as well. We got Don Huffines, previous member of the state Senate, Chad Prather, who is an interesting character here. He's the way I met him, and he talked about himself, is the guy talking to his cell phone in his truck candidate. He's also a Blaze TV talk show. And of course, Alan West, former chair of the Texas Republican Party, who has had his own interactions here in town. So there's a lot of interesting characters and figures already involved in this. There's a few others, Paul Ballou and Danny Harrison, who I haven't heard much stock of, to be frank here. And just to mention the other Democrat candidates who have already declared at this point, we do have Michael Cooper, who was a former candidate for lieutenant governor of Texas in the previous election, and then Deidre Gilbert, a public educator, running alongside O'Rourke. But in that race, it's pretty clear that O'Rourke has taken up most, if not all, of the air in the room, particularly after McConaughey said, not this time anyway, which is its own interesting situation absolutely here. But that's just one of the races we're talking about. We'll get into those and more, delve a little bit deeper into this very top of the ballot one, but we've got other interesting ones to talk about here with Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General, and with the local representative for the federal Congress. So joined here in studio by Chris Babcock, editor of the former editor of the El Paso Herald-Post. Forced to have it there, but now with KTSM-TV, and talk more about that a little bit later as well. So we'll be back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. A bunch of ways to interact with the show, at least have the conversation continuing on as we are out of the studio here this week, but still bringing you these new episodes on the topics that are very much front of mind for me anyway, and will be increasingly important going forward. Talking about elections specifically and some of the top ballot items that are absolutely going to be the focus when it comes to politics here in Texas, locally and statewide, for the next year, pretty much, is what it comes down to. So, joined here in studio by Chris Babcock with KTSM-TV right now to talk and break down some of these things here. So, we've been diving into the governor's race, the gubernatorial candidates who have declared, the major ones who have both, been getting the most coverage that we've interviewed here, and you can go and see those previous interviews, particularly over mainly on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, but also going to be touching on some of those other top-ballot statewide races, including Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, and then one of the more focused on local ones, of the congressional representative from the Texas 16th Congressional District, of which that race is shaping up as well. We're getting to the end of the filing period here, in which things are already pretty clear. Could be some surprises, but the races and the contests that will come out of them shaping up pretty well right now. So, continuing the focus kind of on the gubernatorial race, as we were talking about, basically we got O'Rourke has the most attention on the left. On the right-hand side, Abbott still very popular. It's a very big mistake to underestimate that, but there is some potential daylight, at the very least daylight, that opponents coming from his right, hoping to primary him, have identified. And like you said, Chris, that it did too much. I mean, there were some phrases getting thrown out there about King Abbott making decrees, which was not necessarily totally unjustified, because a lot of these things were coming directly from the governor's office without any input from the legislature, as it was out of session and was not called back in. And there wasn't really but then again, there wasn't really any action from the legislature on dealing with a lot of that, or the specific orders that were the most controversial from the right side anyway, from the legislature in these never-ending sessions. So, I don't know if that argument still holds up a lot in my mind, but that is very much what his major opponents, or potential opponents, are hoping to capitalize on.
I mean, if you look at the way he's popular within his party, he's upper, depending on what poll you're looking at, between high 50s and the low 70s among Republicans. If you go the head-to-head match against O'Rourke, you're looking at it's a statistical tie that's within the plus or minus of 3. Now, let's say that we're going to roll into the primary season where Abbott does have those people running against him on his right. At one point you've got to say it's almost like a presidential race, where do you want to do damage to the party to make your point, or are you going to get in line? I think some of this, a little bit of this, is trying to get their planks into his platform, which, again, Abbott has been doing a pretty decent job of doing a victory lap. He's talked about how ERCOT has gone through and, examined all of the plants and getting them ready for winter, which is a big, that's an if right now. If we get another big freeze in the middle of February where we go right into March, that could not bode well, or it could bode very well for him. But the other side of it is, again, the King Abbott tag is going to stick with him for a part of the Texas electorate, because Texas will Texas, and that's independent, low government, little to no government. It's in the DNA of Texas. So when you have, like you just said, he made a couple of executive orders, not too popular, with that 10 to 15% that wants to just live. And they normally would support Abbott, but he did this, and it's a little bit of an affront to him. It's like, what are you doing against the Texas Constitution, which is the substitute for the American Constitution? We want to do as we wish. And if anything comes out of that Republican matchup that stings Abbott, you can bet that Beto and whoever else on the Democratic side is going to pick up on that and just hammer it home, because if they do cause a long general election and draw this out, it will draw his campaign funds out, and it will start to dent him a little bit to those people who start paying attention to these things in February and March. It's like, really, did Abbott do that? Oh, okay, I don't remember, but hey, he's the guy at the top. So
it's very true. And again, it Abbott is not to be underestimated in Texas politics. I mean, going into this, he had his very strong $50 million war chest going on. O'Rourke having some strong early fundraising, whether he can, a reported $2 million in the first day of his actual campaign announcement. Whether that can be sustained is a decent question, but it's also, as I often point out when we come to this kind of point of a discussion on O'Rourke as a candidate, that he has not let much of his machine that was built in the the Senate election just disappear. There was a lot of it kind of capitalized on by the Powered by People initiative that was started, could have been seen here locally. So that's another factor that I often bring up that escapes people who are not regular listeners to the show anyway. But let's talk about platforms here for a minute, because that juxtaposition between the top candidates for these parties here are interesting differences just even in structure here, because Abbott is very much on the record. He's got a lot of specific things he supported, either legislatively that are planks, like you've said there. But still at this point, O'Rourke's major platform, we've gotten a few tidbits here and there, mostly along, and it gets a lot of focus lately here on legalizing marijuana in the state, but also some things about kind of hinting at immigration reform, kind of hinting at gun reform. And that's about it, though, which is a little bit frustrating at this point, at least for me, when I very much like to look at policy and hoping that they will actually do what they say, which I also don't hold my breath on. But that's kind of a deficiency of, frankly, the O'Rourke campaign at this point, is elaborating exactly what will happen so much as a not Abbott kind of run at this point.
And it's kind of hard to do that because, Abbott's done such an effective job of painting Beto as an anti-gun, open borders, every sort of...
Since before he even announced his run, they had ads running. Like, come on.
Yeah, so it's been out there. And again, that's for his base. Is it going to get traction outside of, again, that little North Texas beltway? Are people going to believe it? Well, they're going to hear it, but then Beto is trying to do this, as he's done previous and very successfully, done that grassroots, come out and meet me, I'll tell you what I'm doing. Now, above that, the next 90 days are very important for Beto as a candidate, because this is when you go ahead and say, this is what I exactly stand for, and start defending yourself on that and start building on that. You cannot just be anti-Abbott. And it's the same thing for Abbott. Abbott cannot just be anti-Beto, painting him with, the national paintbrush of being a Pelosi liberal or whatever. You've got to look at the next 4 years and what's concerning to average Texans. And we're not talking on the fringes. We're talking that very meaty middle. And whoever can get those messages to connect there. And we're talking about, 500-600 votes in Waxahachie. We're talking about some of these outer areas that, they own guns, they understand guns, they understand that the school shootings are something bad, but they're not going to go for banning guns. And the same thing for women's reproductive rights. There's all these third rail attention getters that are out there, but then you got to look at the Texas economy. Where is it going?
Oh, yeah.
Are we going to stick to the oil and gas for the next 50 years when the major automakers are phasing out brand new gas engines? So how are they going to address what's coming rather than saying you're this and you're that on these, I call them bumper sticker issues, because they do get your attention, they do make for very riveting ads, but they don't make for policy. And Beto's got 90 days to define himself and defend that definition and give everybody a solid plan as to what he's going to do should he win. And Abbott, he's got to go say, look what I've done, here's where we're going to go for the next 4 years. And I don't think either candidate has really done that effectively, because they've been distracted by guns, reproductive rights, and immigration. And, a lot of those are going to be federal issues as well. So, I got to say, a lot of people in Texas, they love living in Texas, but, talk too much politics, talk too much federalism. What does that mean to me? Pocketbook issues.
I mean, it's kind of said top down there. I kind of hold the contention, though, that the declaration of O'Rourke's campaign is probably one of the biggest gifts to the Abbott campaign, because as you were mentioning, of the whole challenges from the right, those trying to find daylight between Abbott and the base here. And let's make no mistake, the base in Texas is very right. It is very right wing. I mean, it's Texas. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this here. So I just got to say, and I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again before we're done with this, is that O'Rourke's campaign and being out there in the way that he has is a great gift to the Abbott campaign, because what they can now say is, we don't need to worry about all this stuff with this infighting. We have to focus on the real threat. So I fully expect that they will keep up, as they've already, I mean, they clearly were producing these even before, like months before the run was announced, and then they just had this whole warehouse arsenal ready to go of just popping them out. They've been doing them about weekly if you go over to his, the campaign YouTube channel. So this, they have no lack of material, and that's been the focus at this point. A little bit of, record. I mean, Abbott's still, actually in the governorship, but with a little bit more eye towards publicity for some things even before this. A lot of, out of just even the last legislative session, wondering about, when things were going to be signed, and then he did this whole sweeping thing. Like, it's been very coordinated to this point here, but I really do got to think that, honestly, I will be surprised if, at least not up until after the primaries anyway, that there will be that kind of a main focus for the Abbott campaign. No, let's not be distracted by these issues, by these things, who regulated who locked down who. Let's focus on the real issue, that we need to be strong to face this threat here. We're going to have to take that next break right now, but coming back after the break, talk more about this and the other races here on the ballot, joined in studio by Chris Babcock with KTSM-TV. Stay tuned for more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. A whole lot of ways you can tune into the show, including on-air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media sites, including Facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter @Talk El Paso, or Twitch, Andrew J. Polk. We're in all these places to have that conversation, have it available, and have y'all be able to tune in, chime in, and add your 2 cents. That'll be the best way to do it here for today, because we are out of the office here this week, but still bringing you some new programs and some best of here. So joined in studio here by Chris Babcock with KTSM-TV here, helping us break down some of the very top of ballot elections that we've got. The races more or less resolving themselves as to what the major contestants are going to be for this filing period, which ends as of this week.
Yeah, and it's been somewhat quiet, but again, it's Texas. You don't know who's going to come up, and especially in El Paso, I've seen a couple of emails come through our box at work, and people are saying, "Hey, I'm going to do it. I will look for my announcement. Look for this coming up." So, still a couple that could pop between now and then, but again, it's even with what we have, it's a very entertaining race, shall we say?
I mean, I love it. Even that might make me weird about it. But, I mean, there's potential for surprises, but the major contestants are becoming more clear at this point here. So we talked at length about the governor's race, of which much has been said, but there's a lot of contests on some of those other major, pretty top of ballot statewide races, including the lieutenant governor, of which we had a little bit of interesting action happening with the withdrawal of the candidates in the race to unseat Dan Patrick. More specifically, that there was Matthew Dowd, who has a very interesting path, having been a consultant and being very largely credited for getting the second Bush administration into the White House, then choosing to run for lieutenant governor as a Democrat in Texas in this previous one, but of course then did withdraw as of this past week here, which is an interesting situation after having just appeared in El Paso, for that matter.
And in fact, having done a campaign stop in the 3 or 4 towns, and just I don't know, maybe he was out there and the crowds were less than spectacular. He didn't get the kind of, I don't want to say adoration, but attention that he thought he would. He is a name, but he is an inside baseball name for a lot of people. So if you're not a name, your fundraiser is going to hurt. And I think that might be a little bit, I mean, let's face it, at this point, when you're looking at what's on down ballot, the lieutenant governor, when you're looking at the AG, you have a named candidate in each of those, and then you have other people. And if you can't break through that other people barrier when you're just hitting the road, it's going to be a long haul, and I guess Matthew decided that it wasn't a haul he was willing to take.
Yeah, so that's one of the major developments there, leaving basically the major challenger against, again, the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is Mike Collier, who did run against Patrick in the previous 2018 election as well, and I feel it's relevant to point out that previous margin was closer than he may be expecting at that point in time. Patrick did secure it, of course, but it was a 51 and change to 46 and change, Patrick to Collier. So Patrick, the major, I think, vulnerabilities he has is primarily tied to his performance in the legislature. Comes down to it, because that's, in Texas, the major duties of the lieutenant governor is the leader of the Senate, setting the agenda there. And, I mean, we've heard from both local representatives, other statewide representatives, that it's been a little bit intractable at times there, with just some concerns about the management of such.
Yeah, and we saw it when it went into the special sessions. There was he's not getting things through quick enough. In fact, he even ran afoul of Governor Abbott a couple times. So again, within the party, a little bit of upset there, and Collier can see that. He can see there's much more daylight there than there is in the governor's race, and it does fall to that. What did he do in the legislature? Did he shepherd what needed to be shepherded for the party and for the state? Did that get through? And a lot of people see him as, the Democrats left. He was really portrayed as not being strong leader. He did eventually start, filing the paperwork to get him back in. But I think that dent is there. It was evident at the height, 2018, let's face it, midterm Trump, you had some pretty good popularity in there. And to have it even that close is telling. And compare that to the previous one where he had, was it 56 to 38, or what was it?
It was about 58 to 38%, so a much wider margin at that point in time.
But you can see the margins starting to kind of close up there, and that has a lot to do with what you're doing during those legislative sessions. Are you fulfilling the bill that you've been given by the governor and by the party? And the margins are showing there's people who are not happy with the job he's done there, and I think that's where you're going to see that probably one of the bigger battles.
Yeah, and I mean, whether there'll be daylight, I mean, it's also relevant to point out that in the primary leading up to the 2018 election, the last time Patrick was on the ballot for this, he handily won that one at about 75 to 25% here. So whether the base is still sewn up or not is the real question for him in this upcoming, March primary. But it's just one we want to mention here. There's potential more surprises in that one, but the major surprise having already happened of a dropout of a candidate here. I mean, I guess it makes sense for Dowd to maybe not try to pull a Bloomberg in Texas anyway by just throwing money at it and staying in and then realizing it after all that, good money after bad kind of situation. That, let's just call it there. So if that was the situation, I'm wondering if we're not going to have a spending more time with his family kind of announcement before too long here. But nothing actually backs that up yet. Just, it's weird, and that's the best way I can describe it at the moment. One other statewide one that I definitely want to get to is the Texas Attorney General, which has a surprising amount, well, not surprising if you've been paying attention to it, but given the office and the way it usually is, I mean, it's important to also point out that this is the office previously held by the current governor, Greg Abbott, and I mean there were certain things that he did that rose to attention of the general public as opposed to those that pay attention to legal proceedings. But this one has a lot of activity and a lot of controversy going on it, as there are both some Democrat candidates, but actually a lot of Republican candidates hoping to primary current Attorney General Ken Paxton.
And I think that again is that right side of the party coming at him and saying, you did not do enough to exercise our states' rights. And we've seen what the AG's office has come up against with the Biden administration. They have filed lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. They've not been afraid to file lawsuits against school districts for the mask mandates or for whatever else. So they've gone after them. I mean, it's been, like you said, usually 9 out of 10 people can't name the Attorney General. He has gone out of his way through what he's done to put his name out there on some very also controversial, what some would say were controversial, what others would say is justified. But that's that justified side that you've got to start looking at, because, he's going to get primaried because they feel that as the AG, he didn't defend Texas enough. And that's going to be something that he's not used to, because again, we know he's got this legal history behind him. He's got problems, but this is the first time
investigations
and the allegations that are against him, that is still out there brewing. Again, a little bit of inside baseball. Sometimes it leaks over into the regular press. You'll see, but again, that's because you know his name. You know Ken Paxton. But it's that assault from the right that it's almost a blindside block, because you don't know how to handle it, because all you can say is, hey, look what I filed, and then you've opened yourself up, but you didn't do enough. And it's so hard to defend that, because now you're going to have to go through maybe legal machinations and try to explain to these people who are already unhappy with you. And if you tried to argue with your better half when you're in trouble, trust me, it's not going to be a winning argument.
I mean, Ken Paxton has already had some slim elections on his own here. More specifically, he was 50.6% in the 2018 ballot there, as of having been at 58% in the previous one as well. So, I mean, he's had some legal issues going on for years, investigations that he has successfully defended himself, and, allegations, indictments, etc., various legal situations going on from his performance in office and things related specifically to when he was in office. But that's one factor. The second one I got to think of lately is that he does have something to crow about more recently from his perspective, and that is the return of the Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, because that was a suit filed between him and I believe the Attorney General of Missouri, if I'm not mistaken, and they successfully got that. So he's got something that he can crow about, saying, I am fighting the federal government, but that has not stopped, well, at least not before this anyway, two high-profile candidates coming against him, including a very recognizable name in Texas, George P. Bush, that being, I believe, the nephew of the former governor and president, who is currently the Texas Land Commissioner, and who we've previously had on the show, announcing that run earlier in this year. He was pretty out in front of that one. But then also we have Ava Guzman, who stepped down from the Supreme Court of Texas in order to do this run as well, who we've also had on the show, spoke with her over at CPAC. So they're focusing primarily a little bit on the record, but more on those legal issues. That's been the primary one identified by them anyway in our time on the show here. So that will be one to watch. One I want to mention before we end this segment here is, of course, we do have the local congressional race shaping up primarily to look at the major candidates, as we still have some chance for more to come in before the end of the filing deadline here, of course, incumbent Veronica Escobar, a Democrat, as well as once again challenging Irene Armendariz-Jackson as a Republican against her, setting up a probably potentially similar to the previous election that we saw in this race.
And we do have the other candidates who might pop up at the last minute that have always been out there, again, on the right side, representing a part of El Paso that really feels like they've been disregarded by the Democratic Party. And the Republicans can make that argument that because of the Democratic history, the components around here, they've been ignored, and that their voting bloc has been ignored as well. And I think Armendariz does a good job of kind of tapping into that, saying, listen, I'm your voice, let's move forward. But again, it being a rematch, as we know, in boxing as in politics, some of these rematches go the way of the first match. And it's falling down to, what are you going to do? Are you going to name call, or are you going to give your platform? And I think it's such a key for the Republicans to say, look, yeah, I don't like her, I don't agree with her policies, she does this, that's fine. You're talking to your base there. But when you're talking to the people that are in the district who know Veronica Escobar, they've seen her on TV, they might not agree with all of it, but you know, she was a judge, she represented, she was a commissioner, they know her. And they kind of know her politics, and they're voting for her. What do you have, what do you bring to the table as far as policy to go ahead and bring your issues to the table and your voters' issues that will at least compare and contrast? I think you got to go that next step above just saying, oh, she's a Pelosi liberal, or whatever else is in that bag, because, okay, yeah, we get it, you don't like her, but how are you going to be better?
Yeah.
And I think that's key to going and really moving the Republican Party here forward in El Paso past that 18-20%.
That has really been the challenge. And also, as I will harp forever on until it changes, turnout. Getting people out to the polls, even just in rote amounts, not even just changing the percentage there. I think a Green Party candidate could come in and win this race if they were to get 10% of El Paso to show up to it. They would almost win this. That's been my long contention here. We're due for a break right now. So again, joined here in studio by Chris Babcock with KTSM-TV. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM in this pre-recorded episode here as we are out of the studios for this week here, but have some new programming and some best of our recent great interviews and over from the last year as well. Joined here in studio by Chris Babcock with KTSM-TV here. Been talking a lot about the major elections, the top of ballot ones. Don't want to say that we haven't been paying attention to any of the other ones. We've had a lot of incumbents filing for their county commissioners, city council members, other local posts here. But as we get closer to those, well, particularly the nonpartisan ones that won't be on, this upcoming one will. We'll get closer to those as we get closer to the general election, and as those come up and developments happen, we'll certainly pay attention to those as well. But these top-of-the-ballot ones that, get people most excited and could have some of the more significant impacts for statewide here in the governor's race, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I fully expect Abbott to be able to pull it out and go into the general election facing down O'Rourke.
I got to agree with that. I really don't see the right side of Abbott doing anything other than maybe denting him and giving the Democrats ammunition as they move into the November election. It's going to be a long spring and summer. I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
Get used to a lot of ads of black and white, slow motion, tilted camera angles on one side or the other. But again, it's going to be interesting to see, number one, what Beto's platform is going into the March election, and it's going to be interesting to see what the governor takes out and what he takes with him after that the preliminaries in March, because I think that's going to be key.
I mean, that's going to set a tone for the general, I think, is the major thing.
Yeah.
But how much energy it takes out of Abbott in his campaign is the real question remaining in my mind here, because I mean, there's a couple other Democrats on the gubernatorial primary ballot, but I fully expect O'Rourke to have all the support coalesce behind him. I'd be very surprised if it would take something supernatural almost to happen to make that not be the final result, at least out of the primaries anyway. General election, we'll have to revisit that one once we come to it. And then when it comes to lieutenant governor's race, it's pretty well set at this point here. I'll be surprised, and we'll have to check in to see if there's any last-minute filers for it. But I think that it will come down to not so much a question of either of the candidates in that race, so much as what is happening between the whole, if the much-vaunted blue wave does show up or exist or fall flat again, and will really be the determiner of that race as I see it. With the Attorney General race, you know what, I'm not even going to try to call that one, because whether or not there's any movement on those issues, I mean, there's been a very positive and very accomplishments that can be crowed about by Ken Paxton, the current Attorney General, but if they, as opponents, can really hammer on that. But with two high-profile opponents, it then comes a question of, are they just splitting the anti-Paxton vote here, and will he then move in on that? Maybe move to a runoff here, which would then happen, if I'm not mistaken about the dates on that, that would happen then in May, which would give him a decent amount of time to then figure that out. We'll see here, and then looking like the congressional race pretty well set here. Again, surprises potentially, and El Paso has a bad problem of having too many people on a ballot at a given time here, because another thing that we don't talk about much locally is that losing sticks with you.
Oh, yeah.
Which is something that local candidates, or even locally based candidates, not naming any names, seem to not necessarily get all the time there. That being a perennial candidate is not a good thing. I'm just going to say that here. Of course, we do have the slight wrinkle possible in all of this of maybe a delay in the primaries here, with the DOJ now having that suit against the redistricting maps here in Texas. So that's one we'll have to keep an eye on. As of now, the latest advice from the Texas Secretary of State was that plan to continue as per schedule, but it'll depend on federal judges if they have stays, injunctions, any of that kind of stuff ahead of actual, court action and resolution of it. But that's something we'll just have to keep an eye on, because as of now, expected to go forward, but it's possible.
It's always a possibility out there, especially you coming off of the getting the information on the population. We knew that it was going to be rough. We knew that the legislature was going to be delayed in it. We knew that all this was going into it, and now you have the lawsuit. So again, the court's going to do the court, and it's going to take a while to get through. So go with what you know on the calendar, but just be prepared to pick another date.
Yeah, we will see there, because if the redistricting does get overturned, that's going to be a whole another legislative session, so there would be significant delays most likely in that. So buckle up for that one. One last thing I wanted to address here before we end this show here for today, of course, as we have Chris Babcock here in town, former editor of the El Paso Herald-Post, and now of KTSM-TV. We've had some notice that you haven't been around as much lately, and that's kind of part of the changing relationship going on here with your new duties. Still have the firm partnership in place with our news partners over at the El Paso Herald-Post, but your involvement has been having to change, Chris.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the one I can talk to you about is you're switching from one NASCAR team to another. If you're going from Ford to Chevy, you're going to have to wear that Chevy hat, and I'm wearing it right now for KTSM. I'm glad to be back over with them. Of course, my wife took over as publisher. They still have the great content over there. They still have hyper local content. So I know that she appreciates you guys' support. I know that we do see that bump from once in a while, but I'm over at KTSM. We're trying to do local news right. We're trying to do less of I hate to say it, the pointless breaking news where, hey, guess what? It's March. Breaking news, it's windy. We're not going to be doing that. And, we try to bring you guys the quickest news that we can. And I'm proud to say that since I signed on over there, since about October, We've been winning that battle quite handily. So I appreciate everybody that supported me over there at the Post and that's followed me over to the KTSM. I'll tell you, there's a lot to be said for the KTSM call letters, both here on the air and on TV, because you're looking at 1926, so it's almost a 100-year anniversary of these KTSM radio call letters, and just about 70 years for the TV. So I'm proud to be part of that. I'm proud of my involvement with the Herald Post to bringing it back, and what I'm most happy about is really the audience of supporting local, and that's what you guys got to do.
Absolutely. So you won't be checking with us as you have been on kind of the start of the weeks as we had here, and a lot of people appreciated that. But we'll still have you on in kind of these infrequent manners here on special topics, maybe around elections, maybe around other important things happening here. So still be on and around, but not quite as much as you have been kind of as a mainstay previously.
Exactly. I'll be here for whenever you need me.
All right, fair enough here. So that's going to be our show here for today. Again, thanks to Chris for coming in and laying out this topic that's going to dominate pretty much the next year with elections and such here. So again, you can catch him over on basically the web desk over at KTSM-TV now, but he'll check in with us from time to time. Otherwise, thank you for tuning in here for Talk El Paso. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. We'll do it again here the rest of this week. We are out of the office, but some of the other topics that we're working on for you here do include some of those local small business things, particularly as we're in the shopping season. Also, local initiatives to try to make things a little bit better when it comes to that level, and new technology even being deployed. Also, given the charitable nature of the season, we'll be talking more about, you can give back some of those efforts, some that you all have called us up and talked about here. But so expect some new segments, some of our best of segments here for the rest of this week, and we'll keep doing it as we do and talk El Paso. So, Chris, thanks very much for coming in again to help support us and hopefully get more people involved. If there's one takeaway from this show in particular, it's that vote early, vote often, and bring all of your friends. I'm not even going to say bring a friend. Bring everyone that, if they don't agree with you, I mean, if that's your thing, sure, but particularly everyone that agrees with you politically, just get them to the polls, because we just need to show up here in El Paso. Oh, yeah. That's the soapbox that I have well tromped on at this point. So from the News Radio 690 KTSM studios, I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. We'll do it again here through the rest of this week, Monday through Friday, 4 to 5 p.m., and talk about the issues that affect us here in the Southwest. So leave your comments if you want to. You can also send me an email, andrewpolk@iheartmedia.com. But we'll be back live in the studio next week, but with mostly new programming throughout the rest of this week. So have a great holiday season out there, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow during Talk El Paso. Have a great one, y'all. Stay safe out there.